Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're digging into some truly massive, yet kind of invisible forces that are fundamentally fracturing the Eurasian continent right now. You know, when we think about global instability, we almost always just focus on the latest political headlines. But today, we are zooming in on the raw, physical reality on the ground. We are talking about the literal evaporation of the map, happening right alongside a grinding, super high-tech war of attrition.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll cover two fronts reshaping Eurasia: the vanishing Caspian Sea, the ecological and economic fallout, the attritional Ukraine war, Ukraine's asymmetric drone strategy, and finally, the future of Eurasia. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. Two fronts reshaping Eurasia, the macro threats.
We basically have two incredible crises happening at the exact same time here. On one side, a totally silent geographical crisis with the slow evaporation of the Caspian Sea, and on the other, a very loud, kinetic one with a tech-driven warfare in Ukraine. It's wild to think about, but while we all stare at these static, unchanging maps on our walls, Eurasia's actual borders and economies are actively collapsing in real time. Both of these forces are heavily draining resources, displacing massive populations, and permanently altering the global balance of power.
Moving to Section 2, the vanishing Caspian Sea, a continent drying up. By the year 2100, the world's largest inland body of water could lose an area roughly the size of Portugal. Just let that sink in. And looking at the depths of its different basins tells us exactly why the northern part is essentially doomed to vanish first. The southern and center basins, they're deep, like oceanic deep, ranging from 800 to over 1,000 meters. But that northern basin has an average depth of just 5 meters. It takes up a third of the sea's entire surface area, but holds barely 1% of the actual water. So when levels drop, that massive northern shelf doesn't just recede a bit, it completely disappears.
If we trace the historical water levels, you can see how this crisis is terrifyingly accelerating. Back in 1900, it sat at about 25.8 meters below global sea level. After a devastating low in the 1970s, it actually bounced back a bit by 95. But check out the trend since then. We are locked into a disastrous 3-decade nosedive, bringing us right to the brink today at negative 28 meters, which is dangerously close to the lowest point ever recorded.
A massive catalyst for this drop is what's happening to the sea's main water source. The Volga River is basically the Caspian's lifeline, pumping in over 80% of its fresh water. But between 1991 and 2020, there was a steep 12% drop in the river's yearly discharge volume. Reduced rainfall has seriously choked the river. Combine that restricted inflow with rising surface temperatures boiling the water off faster, and well, you've got a mathematical guarantee for a disappearing sea.
Section 3. Ecological and economic fallout, extinction and stranded assets.
The on-the-ground impacts of this water vanishing are absolutely devastating. Ecologically, we are staring at the very real threat of extinction for the endangered Caspian seal, which completely relies on that shallow northern ice to breed. And economically, it's a total nightmare. Take Kazakhstan's Kashagan offshore oil field. It's the biggest discovery in 30 years and relies entirely on ships. If that water dries up, that multi-billion-dollar asset is just totally stranded inland. Major maritime ports could end up miles away from the water, crippling the middle corridor trade route between China and Europe, which directly spikes global shipping costs. Plus, whatever seabed gets left exposed is just going to kick up massive, highly toxic dust storms.
Section 4. The attritional Ukraine war, the kinetic collapse. Over 1 million. That staggering number represents the estimated Russian casualties, killed and wounded, just since November 2022. It is an absolutely immense demographic blow. We are talking about roughly 3% of Russia's entire pre-war fighting-age male population effectively wiped off the board, while Ukrainian losses are obviously severely gutting their own demographic base at the same time.
Now, to really contextualize that unimaginable human cost, consider this tiny number, 1.5%. That is the total amount of Ukrainian territory Russia has actually gained over that same incredibly bloody period. Over 1 million casualties to capture an area smaller than Los Angeles County. This right here is the brutal, grinding reality of modern attritional warfare. It's no longer about sweeping cinematic map changes. It's about destroying your opponent inch by excruciating inch in an environment where defensive tech has completely outpaced offensive movement.
And the macroeconomics actually funding this war? They are definitely not what they appear to be. The Russian government has been loudly boasting about a 13% GDP expansion over the last 4 years. But Swedish intelligence looked at alternate metrics, like nighttime luminosity, and they estimate Russia's economy has actually severely contracted by about 8%. Moscow is essentially hiding behind inflated numbers while battling 15% inflation and desperately hiking central bank interest rates to a mind-blowing 21%. The whole economic foundation of this war is literally cracking under the pressure.
Section 5. Ukraine's asymmetric drone strategy, changing the battlefield.
With mass armored breakthroughs basically off the table, tactics have had to drastically evolve. This quote from President Zelensky in March 2025 anchors a huge strategic pivot. Moving away from casualty-heavy ground offensives against deeply entrenched lines, Ukraine realized the best way to fight a massive conventional force is to cripple their wallet and their logistics. They decided to take the fight directly to the infrastructure that actually allows Russia to wage war in the first place. So they've rolled out this incredibly methodical three-tiered drone strategy. Step 1, completely saturate the front line with small, cheap, short-range FPV drones, creating a 30-mile kill zone where traditional mass armor just cannot survive. Step 2, deploy intermediate drones to aggressively hunt supply chains right behind the lines, totally devastating crucial logistics routes. And Step 3, launch long-range drones deep into Russian territory to strike the actual economic engines funding the invasion.
By flying these drones up to 1,750 kilometers deep, Ukraine successfully struck critical infrastructure, effectively acting as real-world kinetic sanctions. When global oil prices spiked recently, Russia was expecting a massive financial windfall. Instead, because Ukraine systematically hit over 20 refineries and export terminals, Russian seaborne oil exports completely plummeted, driving output to a 15-year low. It is an absolute masterclass in asymmetrical economic warfare.
Section 6. The future of Eurasia, fracturing foundations.
When we pull back and look at these narratives together, we see a region where the traditional pillars of stability are just crumbling, and there are huge systemic shifts accelerating this collapse right behind the scenes. Critical communication lines are being severed. The Starlink network was blocked for unauthorized Russian use, and Moscow actually inadvertently disrupted its own troops by heavily throttling the Telegram app. At the same time, shifting political winds in Hungary suddenly cleared the way for a massive €90 billion financial lifeline from the EU to Ukraine. And Ukraine is now actively co-producing defense tech and sharing drone countermeasures, permanently cementing its integration with the West.
So, I want to leave you with this to ponder. As the very map of Eurasia literally dries up into toxic dust, wiping out entire industries and trade routes, and as this brutal attritional war permanently drains its demographic and economic resources, how much longer can this fragile system actually hold together before something entirely new emerges?